Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to 61 Shadeborn, the rogue's single target and dual target damage soul. In this guide I'm going to show you how to lay the groundwork for the build and also how to play it. So let's go ahead and get started. Looking at the soul tree breakdown, you see you put the full 61 points into Shadeborn. That is because with the addition of Starfall Prophecy there's a new system called legendaries, which basically makes a couple different abilities from each tree be legendary, which is what this little gold border is. So down at the 61 point you'll see Strengthened Bond, the legendary version, reduces the penalty, which is previously 30%, so a 30% reduction in damage to your Bond of Night target, to 0%. So it's a pretty big bump in damage, making 61 Shadeborn a really strong melee option. For the secondary legendary in this build, we're going to take Void Touch. What the legendary version does for this guy is it allows you every time you cast a finisher to deal the entirety of the Void Touch damage to the target. It also increases the damage of your Void Touch and Nightcloak blades by 50%. This is an extremely strong ability, even before the legendary really, because of this ability here, Bottomless Void. So your Void Touch increases Shadeborn damage by 20%. So basically you don't want to hit any buttons unless Void Touch is on your target. It's a very high priority. For the third legendary, we're going to go ahead and go with Scything Night. Something interesting about Scything Night is that if you cast it on your target while it's in legendary version, which again is going to be this gold border, it will apply an ability called Scything Depths, which is very similar to Consuming Depths if you've ever played Shadeborn before. Scything Depths is going to do a little bit less damage than Consuming Depths, and previously you had to have Consuming Depths on the target in order to be able to proc that from Scything Night. Now, based on my testing from today, you can just cast Scything Night on the target and it'll apply Scything Depths, and it even reflects that in the tooltip. So you don't necessarily have to have Consuming Depths on the target anymore. So very strong stuff. So moving over to the secondary soul here, we're going to go 11 in Ranger. This is a really popular sub-soul combination from Nightmare Tide. However, there is an addition with the legendary called Razorbeast. Before, this was a small level 36 pet. If you make it legendary, it now is a 30-second cooldown, 20% damage increase for non-Ranger abilities. So it's designed for other souls than Ranger, and that makes it a really strong addition to this build. So going up to the 11 Ranger part, it's 5 in Eagle Eye for a 5% crit chance, 5 in Wilderness Training for the 10% attack, power, and weapon damage increase, and also 1 in Predatory Instincts, which is a buff that gives you 4% attack, power, and weapon damage. For the tertiary soul, we go an Assassin. Really, you only need 0 points because you're more so just trying to pick up the legendary Virulent Poison, but we do put the 4 extra points in Ruthlessness to give 4% extra critical hit chance. So for the Virulent Poison here, what this is going to do is it does the same stuff as it does before, the 50% chance to deal like around 4,000 extra damage, but it adds the Acidic Wrath mechanic, which allows you to proc a stack of Acidic Wrath every time this thing goes off. And once you reach 7 stacks of it, they're consumed, and your next 3 non-assassin finishers deal 100% more damage, or double damage basically. So this is extremely strong stuff, especially because the uptime on this is pretty insane. So it's pretty good. Definitely a good choice. So that's it for the souls, guys. And the legendaries, for the masteries, level 61, we take Planar Replenishment. This allows you to heal 25% while in combat, which is pretty good. Also allows your Consuming Depths to take an additional time, which is extremely important. A lot of this build is based off of Consuming Depth to take damage. Going over level 62, I took Ascended Biology because it gives you a 5 meter extra range on your abilities. You can see here 40 meters. Now it's not too terribly important, but when raids and stuff come out, we don't know what kind of distances and stuff they're going to have, so I usually just choose that one. Pretty popular one as well as Revitalize. This gives you an increase of incoming healing by 3%, so totally up to you. Level 63, you have a couple choices. I went with Boundless Energy because this build is kind of energy starved, but if you have the 5% cost reduction buff on, you could probably swap it to Sprinter's Guile or Juke and Run, depending on what you wanted to do. Both of those give you this one gives you a 10% unmounted movement speed buff, and this one will give you a 12% after some ramp up time. And level 64, we take Repetitive Strikes. This is going to give you about a 6% flat damage increase. And Energy Manipulation, of course, applies stacks to you that allow you to do additional damage off global cooldown. So pretty good stuff there. So that's it for the souls, legendaries, and masteries, guys. Now let's go ahead and talk about macros. So look at the macros for Shadeborn. You can see they haven't really changed from my last guide very much. But you'll notice up at the top here we have the shift modifier on Shadow Lash. So what that basically means is this macro is on my 1 key. If I were to just hit my 1 key, it's going to start right there. It'll start with Scything Night. So it'll cast it as soon as it's available. Now if you wanted to delay that Scything Night, say you had 4 combo points or something like I do now, and you wanted to delay that Scything Night so you could make use of that combo point, you could hold shift down, and then it would cast Shadow Lash and when you hit that 1 key instead of casting Scything Night, which would allow you to only get 1 combo point, use a finisher, and then let go of shift, and then it would cast Scything Night for you and not waste those 2 combo points. Now with the change to Scything Night, it'll now add Scything Depths, which is like the basically another consuming depths proc. You may not want to do that, but we'll discuss that later in the rotation section. But other than that, though, it has a Call Razorbeast, which is your 20% damage bump, and a Cast Itself Energy and Manipulation as per the norm. Moving on down to the finisher macro, we have another shift modifier. If you don't like the shift modifiers, there are other options. You can take those abilities and you can put them on separate keys. I personally use X, Z, Q, E, and R for my keybinds, but if you have other ones you'd want to use, you can do that and put those on those buttons. I just feel like the shift modifiers add a lot to the ability to play by being able to strike the same key for two different functions, but it's totally up to you. But for this one right here, so if you hit the 2 key, it'll start with Shadow Flurry, which is going to be your main finisher. If you're mashing it, it'll also cast Call Razorbeast and cast that Self Energy Manipulation whenever they're ready, because both of these two skills are off global cooldown. If you want to cast Nexus of Darkness, like say for instance we come up to have 5 combo points, you can hit your 2 key, which will fire off your Shadow Flurry, and you can immediately hit Shift 2 right after that, which will cast Nexus of Darkness, which will give you 5 combo points, and then you can let go of Shift and hit your 2 key again, and it'll cast Shadow Flurry. So you can cast back-to-back Shadow Flurries off of just using your 2 key and that little Shift button with your left thumb. So totally up to you, but that's how I like to do it. Moving on down, we have the burst macro here. This is just going to have your Shadow Twin cooldown in it, and also your Call Razorbeast. The Call Razorbeast is really just there just in case you're hitting this button when it comes off cooldown, so you can activate it here. This is basically in all of your macros. If you want to min-max, you can pull it out, but I wouldn't recommend it because the uptime is so high. Maximizing the time that it's available is probably going to be a better bet. As far as the rest of it, there's a Shadow Flurry finisher in there just in case you're hitting your R key a bunch of times and forget to swap back. It'll fire off a finisher for you. And of course, Cast Itself Energy Manipulation as well. Moving on down, we have a little bit of utility here. This is Meld into Darkness. This guy right here will allow you to reduce your incoming damage by 90%. Caveat here is that you can't attack during that 6 seconds, so it kind of just takes you out of the fight. You won't die, but you can't do any damage. So pretty nice from a utility standpoint, especially because this is almost like a tank cooldown. But like I said, it does take you out of the fight for a while. Moving on down here, we have Innumerable Shadows and Void Touch. These are 2 extremely important buffs in this build. As we talked about before, Void Touch increases your damage by 20%, but it also does a lot of other things with legendary versions. So it's also going to apply all Void Touch damage on every finisher, and it also increases your Void Touch damage and your Nightcloak Blades damage by 50%. So this is probably one of the single most important skills in this build. Innumerable Shadows is a 10% damage increase, so that's going to be really important as well. Something else that it does that not a lot of people know is it makes your next Shadeborn finisher within 4 seconds have a 35-meter range. So if you ever have a disconnect and you can't use a charge or something, you can use this to cast a finisher at a boss or whatever while you get back into combat. And this is used from the same macro because Innumerable Shadows is off global cooldown, but it has a regular cooldown of 1 second. So you can cast it, and then you can cast Void Touch right after it because Innumerable Shadows will have beyond that 1 second cooldown. Just makes it easier to manage, and we'll show you that in the rotation section. So moving up to the top right here, we have a healing macro. This is just so I can label it. You don't have to do that. You can just put it on your bar if you want. But I do play a lot of builds, so it makes it easier for me to remember. But this one right here will heal you for 10% of your direct damage over 10 seconds, so that's pretty nice. Moving on down, we got the interrupt macro. This is on my 0 key, and I also have this mapped to my middle click. If you cast this, even though it's at focus, it'll cast on whatever you have targeted as long as you don't have a focus. We have 2 charges with this build. We have the Sudden Appearance, which is a damage charge, and then we have Shadow Grip, which is a stun charge. And then we have the 3 Break Frees in this order, specifically because Scything Darkness is on a 1-minute cooldown, Break Free is on a 1-minute 15-second cooldown, and Fading Light is on a 2-minute cooldown. You want to put your lowest cooldown first because it'll be quicker to come back that way. That's it for the macros, guys. Let's go ahead and talk about Action Bar briefly. So starting here with Virulent Poison, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is going to be the same as the other Assassin one, except for now it has an Acidic Wrath mechanic, which allows you every time it procs to put a stack of Wrath on you, Acidic Wrath. Once you get to 7, they're consumed, and your next 3 non-assassin finishers deal 100% more damage, or double damage. Very, very, very strong stuff. Inescapable Bond, same as last time, 5% death damage. The Predatory Instincts gives you 4% attack, power, and weapon damage. Your Energy Manipulation, of course, like as before, this is automatically managed for you, so you can take that off your bar if you want to. However, it is there just in case you want to preload it or whatever. Moving down to your middle bar here, we have your Call Razorbeast on X. Again, this is auto-managed for you, but if you do want to min-max and make sure you're using it during burst blocks, things like that, you can. However, it does have around a 66% uptime if you just manage it, you know, in your regular macros. So that's what I do because it's probably best to do that, honestly. But it's totally up to you. On Z, we got some old crit pots. I need to update these as soon as the raid comes out. On Q, we have the Innumerable Shadows / Void Touch macro. On E, we have Mirrored Strike. This will give you a 10% damage buff. We talked about the Innumerable Shadows and Void Touch. So Void Touch gives you 20% damage, and Innumerable Shadows gives you 10%, and then Mirrored Strike gives you 10%. So between these three skills here, you got a pretty sizable damage increase, so you don't want to let any of those fall off. On the R key, we have the Shadow Twin / Call Razorbeast macro there. These two right here are just there for tracking purposes. On the main bar here, we have the spam macro, which has Scything Night, Shadow Lash, and also has a couple of your cooldowns in it. On 2, we have the finisher macro. On 3, we have the Consuming Depths button, which is really, really important. On 4, we have Strangulate. Strangulate is pretty important as well. It does a lot of damage, but more importantly, it has a chance to reduce, rather, the cooldown of your Nexus of Darkness. So pretty good stuff there. Make sure you keep maximum uptime on that. 5, Bond of Night, very, very, very important skill as well. You got to make sure that you got that sucker on there at all costs because it is going to be a large portion of your damage. On 6, we have the Shadow Restoration Heal. On 7, we have the Meld into Darkness utility. On 0 or middle click, we have the Shadow Spire Interrupt. On the minus key, I have my charges. There's 2 of them. And on the equals key, we have the standard Break Freeze. So that's it for the action bar, guys. Let's go ahead and talk briefly about K-alerts before we get into the play. So there's a lot of K-alerts here, but a lot of them are overlapping. For instance, Innumerable Shadows, this is when it's on and this is when it's off. Same thing with Mirrored Strike. So I'll go ahead and show you that real quick. So the first one you're going to notice is I have this Bond of Night K-alert here. It's loud and obnoxious in big letters because I want to make sure that if I'm targeting something and it doesn't have it on it, and that's what I'm hitting, that I make sure that I put that thing on first. So it's going to be really, really important to maintain. Moving down here, we have the Call Razorbeast and Acidic Wrath. This is from the Ranger tree. This is from the Ranger tree. This is from the Assassin tree. This will tell you how many stacks of the Finisher Increaser you have, and this one will tell you how long you have left on this buff. Moving on down, we have the Shadow Twin here. You can tell they still don't have the correct icons. That's fine though. So this guy will tell you how long you have on the Shadow Twin buff until it wears off. This will tell you how long do you have until the cooldown comes back. Same thing with Shadow Twin. Shadow Twin tells you how many stacks you have and also gives you the cooldown on it as well. So moving on down to the bottom here, we have the Mirrored Strike K-alert here. This is the 10% damage, lasts 60 seconds. You want to make sure that you can clip that early if you want to make sure you have maximum uptime on it. We have the Strangulate here, which is this guy. It's just going to tell you how long you have on it. It's just a timer K-alert. And then we have Innumerable Shadows and Void Touch. These two are really important, but this one has an up and also a down. So it'll tell you, hey, this is on, or hey, you need to hit this, and it also gives you a letter to let you know, hey, this is what letter you need to press to re-up this. So that should help a lot of players out when they're first learning the build. Over to the right, we have another really important part of this build, which is your Consuming Depths proc right here. With big green letters, it says don't clip. That's because you don't ever want to clip that damage over time ability. You want to make sure that it falls completely off. And that's this guy right here. And then this guy down next to it, it looks pretty much the same. This is the Scything Depths. So we got Consuming Depths, which is the main mechanic of Shadeborn. And then we have the Scything Depths, which is this guy right here, the Scything Night, the legendary. It applies that Consuming Depths ability, which is called Scything Depths. So that's just a way to track both of them to see what kind of uptime you're getting on them. But that's it for the K-alerts, guys. Now let's go ahead and discuss how to play 61 Shadeborn. So 61 Shadeborn is not too terribly difficult to play. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that you have a lot of self buffs you want to keep up, like Void Touch and Innumerable Shadows, as well as Mirrored Strike, so make sure you keep max uptime on those. And you also want to maximize your Consuming Depths procs and your Scything Depths procs from Scything Night. So it's got to make sure that you are constantly keeping those guys rolling as much as possible to maximize your DPS. Other than that, it's a lot of 1 and 2 spam, and also making sure that you're keeping your buffs up. So let's see what this looks like. Starting off on this boss, you're going to start off with a Innumerable Shadows and Void Touch spam, which is going to make your Mirrored Strike be able to be cast from range. And after that, you're going to hit Strangulate. So your opener actually has 3 ranged global cooldowns in it, so that should be plenty of time to close the gap versus using an actual gap closer. So let's start this off. We're going to go ahead and do Innumerable Shadows, Void Touch, then Mirrored Strike, Strangulate, Consuming Depths, Scything Night, and then we're going to keep spamming the 1 key to 5 power points, Shadow Twin, Finisher, Nexus, Finisher, back to Consuming Depths, and then back to Scything Night. And we're going to keep spamming this pretty good here, and then get that Finisher off, refresh the Void and the Innumerable Shadows, back to Scything Night, and then use another Finisher, and keep rolling. You can see we're doing like 460 or something right now, so it's a pretty solid burst. Very good burst spec. We're going to go ahead and use Consuming Depths, 1 more Builder, and then a Finisher, refresh there. We're going to go ahead and use our Scything, Strangulate, Finisher, Nexus, Finisher, and then keep rolling the DPS here. So you can see we're about 40 seconds in, we're still doing like 370. It's pretty respectable, especially for this guy's gear. My fragments and stuff need some work still. And you want to make sure you refresh those the Void Touch again, consuming, scything, and then keep spamming that 1 key and go into the 2. You can see we're like 360 still here after a minute, or virtually a minute, and our cooldowns are about to come back off. So I'll show you what the cooldown setup looks like. Make sure you get Mirrored Strike back up, QQ, Strangulate. You want to get back up into this section here, get your burst going, Nexus burst, or for the finisher, consuming depths, and go back to spamming your 1 key. And you want to try, like I said, you want to try and maximize your uptime, consuming depths and scything here. QQ to refresh Void Touch and Innumerable Shadows, scything, finisher, consuming, and we're back up to about 370 or so, which is pretty respectable here. So you can see it's not a bad build. It's pretty easy to play once you get the hang of it. The Kaler truly do help you to play it and maximize it. But other than that, the dual target DPS is pretty much the same. The only thing really different is instead of having your Bond of Night on your primary target, you'll have your Bond of Night on the target you're not hitting. So if you wanted this guy to be your primary target, then you'd put Bond of Night on this target, and then you'd actually hit this target. And then it would split up your damage quite a bit for both targets and give you an increase. But short of that, guys, I didn't go over this in as big of detail as I usually do because with the addition of legendaries, there's a lot of extra stuff. But if you have any questions or comments or anything, please feel free to leave them in the comment section. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.